Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. Today I'm joined with Ann Zaprazny of Great Sports Minds. Ann, thanks for joining me today.
Dan, I am so excited to join you. Where are you based today? Where is your life based today?
Today we are actually in Galveston, Texas.
Nice.
Just got here yesterday. We've been making our way across the state of Texas. We'll end up in Beaumont by the end of the week, and um, we'll be in Beaumont until the first of the year, and then we'll head to Florida. So we are definitely enjoying our journey, and it's nice to connect with somebody from close to our old hometown of Reading, Pennsylvania, you being in Hershey. So it's great to have this conversation. And again, Ann's one of the other wonderful people I've met through Positive Coaching Alliance. So again, Ann, thanks for joining me today. And I think the conversation we're going to have is an important one. As a follow-up to one that I did with one of my former players a few months ago, Bill Hartraft, who is in the mental health space. I think bringing awareness to mental health and making sure that we're all okay is a very important topic, and something that I don't think we've talked nearly enough about in the past. So I'll kind of throw it over to you, Ann. And I mean, why is it so important to bring awareness to good mental health, and why is good mental health as important as good physical health?
You know what? This is my observation. The better we feel physically and mentally, the better we can perform as an athlete, the better we can experience this thing called life. And so I think it's so important to have an awareness around how we're feeling, what triggers us from not feeling our best, and more importantly is what are some of the coping strategies, some of the things that you can take control of that allows you to feel your best.
And what are some of those coping strategies that people can use? Because I think a lot of times, again, with it being, you know, it's not nearly as taboo as what it was years ago. So thank God for that. But there is still kind of this stigma around talking about your mental health, and just, I guess, people admitting to themselves first and foremost that, hey, I've got an issue here that I need to deal with.
Yeah, so you know what? I think it all starts with awareness. And, can you just begin to raise your awareness on a daily basis around your thoughts, your actions, your behaviors? And are your thoughts, your actions, behaviors kind of taking you towards your goals, towards a positive experience? Are they moving you away from your goals and a positive experience? So often I begin the dialogue around awareness. Do you have an awareness of what it is you want? What it is you want as an athlete or just as an individual in this thing called the game of life? And often my clients have very specific things they want, and I oversimplify it to, we want to be our best. We want to feel and be our best. Then the next thing I ask them to really think about is, what is getting in their way? What's getting in their way? So I was working with an athlete last week, and he has to, he's a high school athlete who has to get a COVID testing 2 times a week, right? So, what's getting in our way? For many athletes right now, we don't even want to acknowledge it, but it's this thing called COVID. Depending on where you are in the globe, there's different rules around COVID, but there's this fear: will we get shut down? Will I get sick? Could our team get quarantined? Right? So what are some of the things that get in our way? And that can be fragile self-confidence. It can be self-doubt, fear of making a mistake. It can be poor diet. It can be too much time gaming or involved in things that distract us, right? So, you asked me, what are the coping strategies? And I think before we get to the coping strategies, one is knowing what gets in our way, And how does some of that stuff that gets in our way, like fear of failure, how does that stuff make us feel? Right. And often that stuff that gets in our way gives us anxiety, maybe interferes with our sleep, can take away the joy of our sport or the joy of life, can create depression. Right. So then now I want to think about what are the coping strategies. And, the coping strategies can vary for each individual, but sometimes I put them in a bucket and I say it's 4 M's. You need to move your body. You need to eat well, meditation, and music, positive music, are 4 things in the M category that can like just change how we feel. And then I say 3 S's: structure, social, self-care. And you might go, oh, well, how does that really translate into life? So I was working, this is in the peak of COVID, with a very young athlete who was just very, very stressed. And this 12-year-old had the ability to articulate what coping skills really help him feel his best, better than many adults. He's like,
Wow.
I love to work out in my basement. I love to walk my dogs. I love to draw. I love to read. I like to FaceTime and be with my friends, right? And when we were in the peak of COVID, that was hard. But he had a list of like 8 things that he could identify that lets him feel his best. And he could also say, you know what, on rainy days, it's the hardest. Like he had that awareness. And with that awareness, he then could almost look at that list of things that make me feel better and pull those levers and make sure that he's investing in what he needs to feel his best.
That's incredible for a person that young to be able to have that type of awareness. That's absolutely amazing to hear that, for sure. Because I think a lot of adults have a hard time identifying the triggers that help them feel better, and by the contrary, the triggers that make them not feel so great. So that's pretty amazing to hear that a young person was able to identify that and articulate it so well. So how long have you been in the mental health space?
So I often call myself an educator, right? So I am not a licensed clinician. I actually did a major pivot in my career. I was an insurance professional. In 2014, 2015, I went back to school and got a MS in sports science with a concentration in sports psych. And then I mentored under a sports psychologist for about 10 weeks. And so I started working with athletes in 2016, and often just say, just as you train physically, you can train your mind. You can learn key mental performance skills, i.e. coping skills, that can make a difference in how you feel and how you perform.
Right. So was there anything in particular that made you want to get into this space when you made that pivot from the insurance field?
Yeah. So when I came out of school, 1986, I had a stint where I was a high school coach, and I met Dr. Rob Gilbert out of Montclair University in New Jersey. And he runs a success hotline, and he is just an abundance of wisdom and talent in the space of positive psychology. And so I was a young high school coach, and I met him and I asked him to do some work with my high school team. And then I became a junkie for his success hotline. And he really introduced me to the power of positive psychology. And I continued in my insurance career. And my gift in my career was really developing great teams and helping people perform at their highest levels. And so I decided to just make a major pivot, because when I looked at the landscape of youth sports, it's exploding and kids are crazy stressed out. And we have the paradigm wrong, right? So our elite athletes, our Olympic athletes, our professional athletes work with mental performance coaches to learn how to be their best. I'm like, I think we need to flip that around, introduce these mental performance skills, these coping skills to athletes at a much younger age, so that they recognize, if I fail, I learn. If I fail, I get up. It doesn't mean I'm done, right? So that they learn how to use these skills to grow and enjoy their sport more. So it was a major pivot, but it was just something that was part of my DNA. I had really been doing it in the corporate world, basically did a pivot. Now I work with athletes, and I also still work with business professionals to help them just achieve their goals and perform at their highest levels.
Yeah. So do you think you've seen a change more during COVID for the conversation to become easier around mental health? So I think, whether you're talking sports or just in general, obviously COVID has been, something that's affected all of us and has kind of, taken that human connection away. So is it easier to have the conversation now that everybody's kind of experienced this together? What are you experiencing on your side?
I think what we saw during COVID and what we saw this summer during the Olympics with Simone Biles, to me, Simone Biles just blew the door open and said, you know what, I can't compete today. I can't compete today on the biggest stage. She blew the door open to have the dialogue. And, I've had some coaches say to me, like, I almost feel like I need a PhD in psychology to be a coach. Open the door for coaches to think about, what, maybe I could coach differently. Maybe I could interact with my athletes differently because of the amount of stress that they're balancing in their life. So I think the door is open. Is it fully open? I don't know if it's fully open. I know it's open, but I still think there is this tough guy mentality that, even though we're like cracking that shell, it hasn't fully been shattered.
Yeah. What do you think it'll take to completely shatter that? Because again, there is still that, old school mentality, so to speak, where you just work through it, you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and all that sort of stuff. What do you think it's going to take?
I think it's going to take just more and more people saying, I need help. I have stress. I have anxiety. And this is what I do to manage it. Right. And so that recognizing, when I work with athletes and I share, let's just go self-doubt. I say, what, your mom has self-doubt, your dad has self-doubt, your teachers have self-doubt. Everybody has self-doubt. It's normal. What's most important is we recognize it, and then how do we manage it? How do we manage it? And then how do we beat it? How do we beat it? It's always going to creep up. And then you're kind of like, nope, I'm prepared. I'm ready. Right. And so I think it's going to just take more people sharing, and more, the more people share, the more we shatter the myths around it.
So you said about how important it was for Simone to step up, being on that stage, and of her profile to bring the conversation to the forefront. In the past, a lot of professional athletes and elite athletes would not have the guts to do that. So do you think it's more cases like Simone's in the world to step up and say, what, I can't do it today?
I think it is. What I would hope for is that there's conversations before it gets too much, right? So I'm on the biggest stage in my life, and I can't do it. That's been building. I want that conversation to happen earlier, right? Like, I'm doing it, but I have incredible anxiety. I'm having a hard time sleeping. Okay, so let's start talking about that, and let's start trying different techniques, like maybe meditation, maybe journaling, to help you have an outlet for the stress rather than the pot boiling to the point where, I can't, I'm going to have a meltdown.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess then for the younger athletes, it really is stressing the importance to not only have, um, when I did this same topic with my old player, Billy Hartraft, one of the things we talked about is like parents have no problem writing out, $75 or $100 check to send their son or daughter to get hitting lessons or pitching lessons or, physical performance coach. So I guess the key is to really shift to understand that, spending some of that money on mental performance coaches is probably a pretty important investment as well, because it really is um, a whole package, mentally and
Yeah,
physically. You have to be at the peak all the way around to be able to perform at your best. Is that not true?
absolutely. And I keep waiting for that shift to completely get there. It's not there. There's still. I'll get a parent. They'll call me. They're so excited, and I'm like, "How old's your child?" And they're like, 16. And have you talked to them? No. I go, they're not going to want to do it, right? And so. What I'll typically do is I might find an article on how the NBA uses mental performance coaches, or how Major League Baseball is using mental performance coaches to show the younger athlete that the best in the game are investing in this. Kobe Bryant meditated, Michael Jordan meditated, right? So to start to show the younger athletes and the coaches of younger athletes that it's both physical and mental, right? And so, in a perfect world, we begin to introduce some of this into coaches' curriculum. And it can be as simple as, using your breath, right? And when athletes have performance anxiety, right, the breath gets shallow and the words get really negative. Don't screw up, you made an out last time, whatever. And so a technique that I use, and basically a coach gave it to me and I pay it forward, is we teach athletes how to slow their breath down and then be intentional to have one word on inhale, one word on exhale. So I inhale calm and I exhale confidence. I take like 5 breaths. I now have slowed my body down and I've changed the thoughts, right? From fear, don't screw up, to calm and confidence, right? So something as simple of, can you teach how to use your breath? And can you actually have a dialogue on around how can you be intentional to use your breath for your sport? So I have 2 young, really elite tennis players from Australia who shared they only use their breath when they were angry, who now have a strategy that they use their breath during warm up, in between points, before they serve, when they change sides. And that simple shift from only when I'm annoyed to I have a plan around my words, calm and confident, can be a game changer for poise, composure, and how I feel.
Right. So I guess the other key component to this, as far as, bringing awareness and bringing it to the forefront, is coaches understanding the importance as well, and understanding that, hey, what are some things a coach can do to break down those barriers to, let Johnny or Susie know that, hey, it's okay to come up to me and have a conversation, that things aren't all right today mentally. I mean, what are some of the steps that they can take to really, give their athletes that comfort zone to be able to come and approach them about this topic?
Yeah, so I think coaches, there's an opportunity to use empathy a little bit more, right? And, I was a high school coach, and sometimes you're like, you just look at that 2-hour block of time and you just focus with such intensity around what you need to accomplish in that block of time. And how do you create that environment that looks at the athlete as a total person, that maybe in this moment you think they're dogging it and the reality is they haven't slept or they didn't eat or someone in their house is ill, and rather than immediately getting on them for their what you perceive as lack of effort, is having a dialogue that says, hey Dan, you don't look like yourself today, is everything okay? Really remembering that they're a total person. I coached in the inner city back in the late 80s, early 90s. And I had a kid that took 3 forms of transportation for an hour and a half to come to our little private Catholic school. And, we practiced 4:30 to 6:30. So she probably had been up since 5 a.m., right? And, I probably would say my empathy bucket wasn't so great then. But when I think about it, I'm like, kudos to her, right? And her family for how hard they worked to send her to a private school in a safe community, and if she didn't have energy on a particular day, it probably was valid. Right. So number one, have a little bit more empathy. And then two, I'm a big fan of the Positive Coaching Alliance curriculum, right? And specifically fill the emotional tank of your athlete. Fill the emotional tank of the athlete. The better they feel, the better they're going to perform.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And again, I think, like I said, as coaches, a lot of times you do become laser focused on, the fundamentals, on the, game day things and that sort of stuff. But to really understand that whole package, I think, is what sets good coaches apart from great coaches. And, making your coaches understand, making your players understand that you love them. I think, it's funny when you think of Division I college football coaches, they, always are talking about, winning and, the pressure that's put on them at that level to perform and to win. But then you listen to guys like, Bobby Bowden would talk about, our program is actually based on love. Our players need to understand that we love them and they love each other. And, to hear a guy like that, refer to what he's doing in that sense, I think is incredibly important. And even, Dabo Sweeney talks the same thing about, loving his players and that sort of stuff. So, to break the tough guy mentality and really put, what we're doing as coaches into, the sentiment of loving your players, isn't that a huge hurdle to get over and, to help these kids really understand what, you're out there doing for them?
Yeah, absolutely. But I also think parents need to kind of have their antenna up, right? Because you have so many kids playing travel sports, right? And then we're club shopping for the most competitive, best team, et cetera. And, what's so important as a parent is, do you agree with a coach's philosophy? Do you agree with how they treat the players? Right. And it's like, how does your athlete feel? Do they feel welcome? Do they feel included? Are they berated? Are they abused? Right? Verbally abused. It's important to look at that whole piece when we think about our athletes.
So with the travel sports arena that has really exploded over the past 10, 15 years, and the fact that you do have a lot of players and parents who are jumping from team to team, how do you think that has affected the mental performance of a lot of these young players?
Yeah, so I think it can be challenging. I can be a big fish, a big fish in a little pond. And now I'm on an elite team and I struggle, right? And so when I think about travel ball, right? So I'm a parent of a volleyball player. I'm really a fan of the right placement, right? You get better by playing, you get better by touches. And if we jump too high of a level, like I got 10, 11-year-old clients who are on a travel team where they don't play. You're ruining it for them. 10 and 11, who cares what your win-loss record is? I get it, but I don't get it. Your job when kids are that young is to foster the joy of the sport and to keep playing, right? So I think the travel phenomena has many benefits, but has a lot of downsides. And I say that respectfully. And we're in a pay to play arena, right? So if you're from an economically disadvantaged situation, you may not be able to do it. So, there's a lot of pros, but there's a lot of challenges.
So what are some of the questions a parent can ask when they're looking at a program, to get their son or daughter involved in?
Yeah, it's really interesting. We were just at a meeting and the club did a PowerPoint, and they, what they focused on was the number of athletes that got college school. No, number of athletes playing in college. That's what they focused on. And in my mind, I'm like, do you do background checks on all your on all your coaches? Have they done safe sport? Like give us some of the fundamentals that say, hey, we're doing, and maybe I'm too close to it, but just make sure you are in a club that is doing background checks, is requiring some type of training, maybe safe sport or some type of training that basically ensures that the coaches know what's appropriate and inappropriate behavior. What is the philosophy around playing time? And, I'm not saying this is a wrong philosophy. I just think it's an important philosophy to know, we're out to win. All right, we're 11-year-old travel team. We're out to win and we're only going to play the best. Is that what you want for an 11-year-old? My humble opinion, at that age, you want your kid to play and to enjoy it. So if that means they play at a lower level and get to play, they're going to have a positive experience and enjoy the game longer. So, what's the experience of the coaches? What's their philosophy? How do they invest in teaching? And, what's the most important criteria? So again, one of the clubs we went to was really, this is what our win-loss record was. This is the number of kids that are playing in the college level, and no information around background check, no information around percentage of kids who come back to the program, right? So if we're club hopping, did I play, as a 14-year-old and I'm back as a 15-year-old and I'm back as a 16-year-old? So maybe questions around retention.
Yeah.
And what type of training,
huge.
and what type of training? And a coach will get offended by that. What type of training? What do you mean, what type of training? Have you ever taken a course by the Positive Coaching Alliance? What do you do for your professional development?
Right.
They'll get offended by that.
I think if a coach gets offended by that, that's a red flag right out of the gate.
Right.
Because one of the things I used to always tell my players, when I was coaching, is like, look, if we're teaching something to you guys that doesn't make sense, ask the question. Ask us why we're teaching you to do it this way. And that's a fair question to ask. And I think coaches who have an issue with being questioned on their philosophies, that's deeper rooted issues going on there. Because again, you should be able to explain why you're doing things to your coaches and not to your players, and not take offense to them questioning the why. And I think that's very important. So what are some of the other red flags that parents or coaches can look at in a player's physical performance that may actually be signs of something that's going on mentally?
Yeah, you know what? Players can be in a game and be physically shaking. They can be in a game and hyperventilate, or like a little bit of a panic attack. Maybe really just struggling to run a play. All right, so maybe a little bit of confusion or overwhelm. We've seen it at the NFL level. I don't remember who it is, but performance anxiety in a game where the person came out. I've had it with like a high school athlete that started in the game, started to have some performance anxiety, how to come out, purposeful to walk away, do some really deep breaths, and using her words, calm and confidence, to gain composure. So I think when parents are watching their son or daughter play, right, we can be really overly invested. So one, what can we watch, and can we be quiet, or just keep our enthusiasm to good job, you know what I mean, and not coach from the sidelines. Especially if you have a child that is ambitious and wants to play at the next level, college coaches don't want to see their kid checking the stands to see what mom or dad are saying. They want to see a kid that is focused on the court or focused on their, the field, and attentive to their coach. And it's like an adjacent to what you asked, but when the game is over, the number one thing a parent can do is just say, I love to watch you play. Let's go get some, what do you want to eat? And that's a line from John O'Sullivan from Changing the Game. Kids will tell you in any survey data, when they look back, what they enjoyed the most was time with their friends and family. And what they hated was the car ride home.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that's so important too. And it's tough, it's tough to try to, explain that to a parent, how important it is to just, keep your cheering to cheering, not giving a hitting lesson from the stands. There's so many things that are going through that player's mind in competition that the last thing they need is yet one more, set of instructions. Even most of the best coaches will say, the game is for the players, practice is for the coaches to teach. So a lot of times you see some of these coaches nowadays who are out there, again, giving a lesson, during the game. And it's like, that's not the time or place to do it. You should have done your work to prepare your players for that moment in the 5 practices leading up to that moment, or however many it was. So what do you think, has been kind of that cultural shift? Because I noticed that's something that seems to really have only exploded kind of in the last 10 or 15 years as well, where, the game seems about the coach, the game seems about the parent, as opposed to about the player who is supposed to be about. What do you think it's been that's shifted, that's made, this kind of constant, nonstop coaching and not letting the kids just go out there and, put what they should have learned in practice and into play in the game, and then learn from whatever mistakes they made during the game at the next practice? And that was always the way I approached coaching, is, teach you.
I think there's so much focus on winning really early that we're crazy. Right? Like literally through JV, it should be, can we grow your sport skills? Can we get you to love the sport so you keep playing?
Yeah.
Right. And I think there's just so much focus on winning. There's increased pay to play. So if I'm paying more money, then I feel like I have the right to say, I have the right to criticize, I have the right to interject. It's not easy. It's not an easy time to be a coach, right? And I have a daughter who is a junior in high school, who thinks she wants to play D3 volleyball. And I always just say to her, you gotta love it. You gotta love it. right? And so when, as parents, if you want something more than your kid wants, like you're looking, you know, if your athlete, if your child wants something, they'll go chase it. So I
Yeah.
just think that there's so much emphasis on winning, and people feel like they have the right to be a part of the process.
Right. Right. Interesting for sure. So we're just about out of time. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to bring to my listener
Yeah, you know
attention
what?
on this
When you
topic?
asked me, you know, is there anything that we should be watching for when an athlete is competing? I want to take that beyond competing. So let's say there is, you know, we've had the competition and it's over, and you know your child is down or depressed for multiple days. That's important to recognize, right? Sports is what we do, it's not who we are. And often, you know, it's true for me when I was in high school and part of my college career, right? They're one and the same, right? And so the journey I try to take an athlete through and a parent through is, can we recognize sports is what we do, right? You know, there are other parts of who you are. You're a sibling, you're a teammate, you're a student, you like music, you know, you're in a couple clubs, you go to a church, you're a pet owner, right? There's this whole picture of who you are. And if a loss or your personal definition of a disappointing performance knocks you down for multiple days, that you can't shake it, there's something going on, and that you've tied who you are so closely to your performance in sport that there's an opportunity to like do some work so that you recognize that you're more than your sport. And people will love you whether or not you have a good performance or a poor performance.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And again, just to kind of reiterate that, a story I tell often is several years back, the organization I used to run, before Sandy and I decided we were going to sell everything and cruise around in an RV. We had Bill Ripken come speak at our banquet, and at one point during his speech, he said, "You know, um, my brother's career as a baseball player does not define him as a man." And you know, when you hear it again at that highest level, you know, where Bill Ripken referring to his brother Cal, who's, you know, played the most consecutive games in Major League history and has made it to the Hall of Fame, puts it in that perspective that that isn't what defines him as a man. I think that truly can tell a young person that, yeah, there is a lot more to you than whether or not you score, you know, 25 on the high school basketball court, you know. So I think just keeping that into perspective, that it is just one component of us as very complex beings.
Yeah.
So
So I want to share something. It's a little plug, but it's a tiny little plug. So I wrote a book called The Great Sports Minds Athlete Journal, and it's a mental performance journal. And I wrote it to make mental performance training available to anyone. Right? You can buy it on Amazon for under 20 bucks. And I shaped part of the daily prompts to help athletes see the good in their day. Because when I work with athletes one-on-one, what I hear is just that they're beating themselves up. They're not enough. They didn't do it enough. They didn't do it well enough, right? And so a couple of the prompts, I won't go through all of them, but it was like, what am I grateful for today? Right? So, right, if we can express gratitude, real gratitude, it can be a game changer. What did I do today that I'm proud of? Most athletes, they go, they work out, it wasn't good enough. I'm like, what did you give your best effort today? Right? Effort over that result. What's one thing I can learn or improve? Right? To recognize that we're on this journey to just continuously get better. So rather than berating ourselves, just recognize, what can I continue to work on and improve? Right? And then one of my questions is, what's important now? Because sometimes we get so distracted on something that's, a couple weeks away, like what's important right now. And so, there are resources. It can just be journaling in a plain notebook, using your breath, meditation, raising your awareness to your self-talk and rewriting it, that can really be impactful at shifting how we feel, how we think about ourselves every day.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I will definitely put a link to in the description of the podcast so people can check it out. Because again, I think the more resources that are available to athletes out there today, the better off we are for sure. And again, something like that, if they're uncomfortable having the conversation, with a coach or a parent, maybe they're okay going on Amazon and ordering a book to kind of start doing some of their own self-diagnosis, so to speak, leading up to having that conversation. I think ultimately it does come down to being comfortable with having the conversation with others. And I think these conversations here continue to help take away some of the awkwardness or some of the taboo that has existed around this topic for so many years. So I appreciate you taking the time to, help bring it to the forefront and, continue to have the conversation. I do always ask my guests one final question. The subtitle of the podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places, which comes from a song by an artist named Michael Franti, where the opening lyrics go, when many little people in many little places do many little things and the whole world changes. So what are one of the little things that Ann does on a daily basis to help make the world a little bit better place?
Yeah, I love that. Give. God's blessed me with certain gifts. It's my job to pay it forward to help others be their best, right? So it's really about helping others see greater potential in themselves and feel better about themselves.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And before we go, just a shout out, if anybody wants to get services from your company, is there a website they can go to? Or the book's available on Amazon. I mean, just give yourself a little self plug here.
Yeah, so my business is called Great Sports Minds LLC. So that's my website. And I also have a YouTube. There's a one good video where I teach my breathing technique. And so maybe we'll make sure we link that in. But folks can follow me on social media, on Instagram and Facebook at Great Sports Minds. And my website, again, greatsportsmindsllc.com.
Awesome. And again, I appreciate the time. And for my listeners out there, be sure to check out my other blogs and podcasts at AnnClouser.com. And thanks again for taking the time. Appreciate having the conversation.
No, Dan, thank you for all that you're doing. Right? Changing the world one day at a time. Love it. Absolutely love it. So thank you.
Thank you.